So I got back and I had another 3.5, I guess 4.5 more months before I was getting shipped out. But, for being a camper and going into this very hardened side of the system, it was a lot to take in. I still look back to these days. I'll have some nightmares sometimes where I'll wake up and I hear the banging on the cell doors, the inmates at 2 a.m, the DC, Baltimore wild guys, the younger generation, that 20-something group down there just, booting the hell out of their door just to get under the guard's skin and, get on their nerves. And, these guys were smoking deuce and everything else, so they were all fucked up. And it was just a different experience. And I say I wake up from nightmares. It's not really a nightmare. I was, adjusted by that point in time, but sometimes those memories come hauntingly back, and you sit up in bed like I do, and you look and just, you take stock in what's around you to make sure, A, you're not in a cell anymore, and B, thankful that you're free and back to a normalcy of life. So quite an experience, quite a mental adjustment, a different level of what's willing to be tolerated when you come out of prison. And when you come out of a part of prison like that, you look at respect for one another. You look at what's worth or not worth doing at that point in time. The risk-reward factor of life. It changes your perspective immediately when you get out into a fresh compound and you have that freedom to walk around and you're not locked in like an animal all day. So I understand why people have this disdain for law enforcement. I understand why they have this, just hatred towards certain types of, parts of the penal system and the judicial system. I get it, man. I really, really, truly get it. I've adjusted back to the most I can, I think, for now, of what a normal person would feel like being free and coming in contact with law enforcement or whatever, for whatever reason. I have a tolerance for accepting normal behavior, but I'm a heavy critic of when I see things that look a little out of sorts or heavy-handed in the wrong direction because a badge is being worn or a gun's being toted. I've got zero tolerance for it and no appreciation whatsoever or respect. So that's a shame, and that's something that needs to be addressed in Congress one of these days, sooner than later, before there's a civil uprising of some sort. I'm quite sure, me only having just under 2 years in, somebody coming out with 20 or 25 years of just horribly spent time and, some very terrible exposure to that judicial system, whether it's the whole or not, you're going to have your hands full if you don't adjust how inmates are taken care of and the quality of the prisons that they're facilitated in. And we'll talk about prison quality and, your surroundings and all that stuff with the rats, and it's just horrible. But so back to the main part of this story, the whole experience of the whole was eye-opening. It was horrible because I didn't have contact with my family. I had one phone call a month. That was it. I called my mother, who she was my lifeline while inside, and she would communicate with the rest of my family for what was going on. I would write her almost every other day, and we communicated, frequently through mail. I wrote all my children. Sometimes mail got to them, sometimes it didn't. Very questionable how that works. And again, you lose perspective on, just the basics of life. You're hanging on the guy coming and throwing a letter under your door, praying you got mail that day for correspondence from your loved ones because you want to be connected. After that, I did a lot of, like I said, exercising in my cell. I had to get a routine. I didn't know how much time I was going to be in there for, but I knew every day had 23 hours at least that I wasn't going outside, so I had to figure out what to do inside. I read a lot. Books were my new thing. That was my new favorite thing. I've got a creative mind as it is, and it went wild when I started reading books. I can imagine places, and especially where I was, that infectious, that disease-ridden kind of feeling of being confined in prison was so overwhelming that your imagination could run wild with storytelling in these books, at least the decent written ones, with good subject lines to read and indulge yourself in. I love reading. I just love it. And I've never read before. I read over 100-some books while in the hole. I couldn't not read. I read 3, 4, 5, 6 hours at a clip without a break. I would read 400- and 500-page books in a day. I worked out a lot. I did a lot of push-ups, a lot of sit-ups, and I did mention I had a shower in my cell, as everybody did there. I used my bed sheets and rolled them up and tied them off and rolled them tight almost like a rope bar, and hooked them onto the 2 hooks that were very sturdy in the shower for the curtain. And I used that as a pull-up bar. So I did pull-ups, sit-ups, and push-ups, burpees, anything. I got creative with it. I did everything I could in my little 40 square feet to get exercise in a couple hours a day. Out in the rec yard, I did a lot of chit-chat and got some advice on fighting my case, if you will, my charge, because they had some bullshit written up on the charge initially. And that's a whole different process, to tell you. So I kept my days full pretty quick. I learned to adjust at a fast pace. You don't have the privileges as you did on the outside with commissary and the access to certain things. I was not on commissary restriction. They wanted my money because I spent money. But I didn't have phone calls, emails, and visits. Those were taken away. So at the end of the day, they give you opportunities to have your medical needs. Lifesavers or halls was a big thing. It's just something that, it kept your throat from drying out because of the conditions and the dust and the lack of cleanliness in the cells and the range. It was also the closest thing to a candy that you could possibly acquire off of the commissary list. You can have 2 packs of like crackers, or a bag of party mix in a box of crackers, an 8-pack box of crackers a week. That's it. So you learn how to ration out anything that was extra. And again, in prison, there's really no such thing as extra. I would learn how to fish. Like I said, we'll talk about that later, to get extra things down the hallway, and I would substitute what I had to give back in return, like a purchase, like crackers or the party mix. I was there during Ramadan, which is a Muslim holiday during the spring months. And they had certain treatments because of the religious holiday, so I would trade guys and smuggle in from the rec yard, like peanut butter packets and coffee and things like that. And in return, I would supply them with crackers or magazines that I would receive in the mail. And there's a whole barter system made, and you got pretty chummy with guys in the hole because you guys were surviving together regardless of the independent reasons there. You were doing hard time in hard time. So you learn how to network and utilize the system. But those are the experiences you come across, and the time, how you do it in the hole or in the S.H.U. It's not fun by any means. I don't ever want to redo it. But I'm going to say this. I'm thankful that I did it. I mean, I was incarcerated regardless. So while in, I'm glad I did that time. I'm glad I spent 6 months in the hole. I missed my family. I couldn't communicate with them the way I wanted to, or had the visits I used to get. But having that experience put a whole different spin and perspective of never to do again, like go to prison, never to get involved with people who are doing shady shit. And when in troubled times, something to reflect back on and look at my darkest hours and my worst fears of what life had to offer. Man, oh man, does it wake you up and you get re-inspired about living again. So it's done well for me. It's a shame I was there to begin with. I put myself in that position. Nobody's at fault but me. I've done my time. I've paid my debt to society. I'm a free man. I'm here to speak about it during these little story time, talks. This is life beyond the bars, which is what I'm calling this. I've got a lot of perspective on how to handle yourself when you come out, getting back into life, doing the right things, trying to make good on whatever it is you're paying back to, whether it's to your family, if you've got restitution, or just to prove a point that you're not a bad person, girl or guy. Stay tuned, watch, follow along. I've got other channels that, or I got other videos, I should say, on the same channel that are on, selling cars in the auto industry and how to get a job. And follow along, like my page, subscribe, bang the bell so you get new notifications. Feedback, if anything, positive, negative, I don't care. I got thick skin, I can care less. But most of all, I hope you find this informative, somewhat entertaining, and hopefully, if you haven't gone to prison, this will give you some insight on why you should never go to prison. So stay out of prison, stay healthy, be real with yourself, and let's stay strong. Thank you.